Hey there, awesome viewers. I'm so excited you're here for this crazy story. Before we dive in, I've got a super fun question for you. Have you ever had a nosy neighbor who just couldn't stop poking into your business? Maybe they stared at your yard or complained about something silly. Drop a comment below and tell me all about it. Oh, and let me know where you're watching from today, maybe your couch, your bedroom, or even school. If you love wild stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss a single second of the action. Ready? Let's go. Okay, picture this. A super quiet neighborhood with cute little houses all in a row. Each one has a neat lawn, pretty flowers, and maybe a swing on the porch. It's the kind of place where kids ride bikes and dogs bark at squirrels. That's where Jake Miller lived. Jake was a totally normal guy. He wasn't loud or fancy. He worked from home at a desk by his window, tapping away on his computer. Sometimes he'd wave at a neighbor walking by, but mostly he kept to himself. He liked things simple, no drama, no fuss. But here's a secret nobody in the neighborhood knew. Jake wasn't just a regular guy. Sure, he looked like one with his plain t-shirts and sneakers. But Jake had a cool side job that made him way sharper than most people thought. He wasn't out there bragging about it, though. Nope, Jake was the kind of person who watched and listened. He noticed things others missed, like a detective in a movie, but without the hat and magnifying glass. That little secret made him special, even if nobody else had a clue. Now Jake's street was super peaceful most of the time. Birds chirped, sprinklers sprayed, and everybody got along fine. Well, almost everybody. There was one person who stirred up trouble wherever she went, Karen Thompson. Oh man, Karen was a piece of work. She was the president of the HOA, that's the group that makes rules for the neighborhood, like what color your mailbox can be. Karen took her job way too seriously. She walked around with a clipboard like it was glued to her hand. Her face always had a grumpy frown, the kind that could make a puppy run and hide. And boy, did she love sticking her nose into everyone's business. If your grass grew just a tiny bit too long, like half an inch, Karen would be knocking on your door, wagging her finger. Fix it, she'd snap. Forgot to roll your trash can back inside by noon. Boom, Karen's writing you a fine on her clipboard. One time, she even yelled at a kid for leaving a soccer ball in his own front yard. Everybody in the neighborhood had a nickname for her, HOA Karen. They whispered it behind her back, giggling nervously. Nobody wanted to mess with her, because Karen could make your life miserable. Jake, though, he wasn't looking for trouble. He tried super hard to stay off Karen's radar. He mowed his lawn every Saturday right on time. He painted his mailbox the boring beige color the HOA wanted, even though he thought it looked dull. He never left toys or bikes or even a single leaf scattered on his driveway. Jake's house was so tidy it could have been in a magazine. He figured if he followed all the rules, Karen would leave him alone. Easy, right? Wrong. For some reason, Karen had her eyes on Jake from the moment he moved in. Maybe it was because he was new to the neighborhood and she didn't like new people. Maybe it was because Jake didn't act scared of her like some neighbors did. He didn't bow his head or say, "Yes, ma'am," when she bossed him around. He was polite, sure, but he stood his ground. And Karen, she didn't like that one bit. It was like Jake was a puzzle she couldn't solve, and it drove her up the wall. One bright, sunny afternoon, Jake decided to do something smart. He put up a motion sensor light by his front door. You know those lights that turn on when someone walks by at night. They're awesome for keeping things safe. If a cat or a person gets too close, poof, the light pops on bright as day. Jake thought it was a great idea. His house would be safer and it wasn't even a big deal. The light was small, neat, and didn't bother anybody. He screwed it into place, tested it out, and smiled. Perfect, he said to himself, dusting off his hands. But guess who didn't think it was perfect? Yup, Karen. That same evening, Jake was chilling inside when he heard a loud voice outside. He peeked through his window and there she was, HOA Karen, standing right in his driveway. Her hands were on her hips and she was staring at his new light like it had just called her a bad name. Her clipboard dangled from one arm and her frown was deeper than ever. Jake sighed. Here we go, he muttered, stepping outside to see what the fuss was about. Excuse me, Jacob, Karen barked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She always called him Jacob, even though he'd told her a million times his name was Jake. Did you get HOA approval for that thing? She pointed at the motion sensor light like it was a monster. Now Jake stayed super calm even though he wanted to roll his eyes. It's just a motion sensor, Karen, he said. It lights up the porch at night, keeps things safe. Karen's eyes got all squinty like she was trying to shoot lasers at him. We have rules, Jacob, she said, waving her clipboard in the air. You can't just stick up whatever you want. This is a nice neighborhood and we don't need your junk ruining it. I'm reporting this right now. Jake blinked. Junk. It was a tiny light, not a pile of old tires. But he didn't argue. He just shrugged and said, Okay, Karen, do what you gotta do. Then he turned around and went back inside. He wasn't scared of her. He figured she was just being her usual grumpy self, blowing hot air like a big balloon. Karen loved to make a fuss, but she usually forgot about it after a day or two. At least, that's what Jake hoped. But here's the thing, Karen wasn't just annoyed this time. Oh no, she was obsessed. That little motion sensor light, to her it wasn't just a light, it was like a giant sign that Jake wasn't following her orders. And Karen hated when people didn't listen to her. She stood there in his driveway for a long time, staring at the light, her lips pressed tight together. If you looked close, you could almost see the wheels turning in her head. She was planning something mean. Something that would make Jake wish he'd never bought that light. Jake didn't know it yet, but Karen's little grudge was about to grow into a huge problem. Her clipboard wasn't just for show, she was ready to use it like a weapon. And what started as a silly fight over a motion sensor was going to turn into something way bigger. It was like a tiny spark that could light up the whole neighborhood in flames. Jake thought he was safe, just living his quiet life. But Karen, she was about to make things wild. So what do you think Karen's gonna do next? Is she just gonna write a mean note, or is she cooking up something crazier? Drop your guesses in the comments because I promise this story about to get super juicy. Stick around, grab some popcorn, and let's see how this all plays out. You don't want to miss what's coming. The next morning, Jake woke up feeling pretty good. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and he was ready for a nice day. But then he opened his front door and yuck, there was a big, ugly surprise waiting for him. A bright yellow piece of paper was taped right to his door, flapping in the breeze. It was a violation notice from the HOA, and guess who signed it? Yup, Karen Thompson, the grumpy HOA president. Jake pulled the paper off and read it. The note said his motion sensor light, the little one he put up for safety, was unapproved. It called the light disruptive and said it messed up the neighborhood's fancy look. Jake couldn't help it. He laughed out loud. Disruptive. It was just a tiny light that turned on at night. How could that bother anybody? But the note wasn't done. It gave Jake 3 days to take the light down, or he'd have to pay a $500 fine. $500. That was crazy for something so small. Jake wasn't mad yet, though. He was annoyed, sure, but he thought he could fix this. Maybe Karen was just having a bad day, so he decided to talk to her and clear things up. He put on his sneakers, grabbed his keys, and walked 2 houses down to Karen's place. Her house looked like it belonged in a picture book. The bushes were trimmed into perfect squares, the grass was green as a lime, and there wasn't a single speck of dirt anywhere. It was almost too perfect, like nobody even lived there. Now Jake took a deep breath and knocked on the door. A second later, Karen opened it, and she had this smug little smile on her face, like she'd already won a game Jake didn't know they were playing. "Jacob," she said, dragging out his name like it was a bad word. "Did you come to say sorry?" Now Jake stayed calm. "I just want to clear this up," he said. "The light's for safety, Karen. It's not hurting anybody. It just turns on if someone walks by at night." Karen crossed her arms tight and tilted her head. "Rules are rules, Jacob," she said, her voice all snippy. "If we let you break them, then everybody will start doing whatever they want. I'm protecting our property values. This is a nice neighborhood, and we don't need people like you messing it up." Jake felt his face get hot. Property values? Come on, that was silly. It was one little light, not a giant neon sign. He tried to explain again, saying how the light kept his porch safe and didn't bother anyone, but Karen wasn't listening. She just kept talking right over him like his words didn't matter. Then she said something that really hurt. "Some people just don't belong in a nice neighborhood like this." Ouch, that one stung. Jake wasn't rich like some folks on the street. He didn't have a fancy car or a huge house. But he paid his bills on time, kept his lawn neat, and never caused trouble. Why was Karen acting like he was garbage? It wasn't fair. He wanted to snap back, but he bit his tongue and stayed quiet. Arguing wouldn't help, not with someone like Karen. He turned and walked back to his house, his stomach feeling all twisty. Karen's words weren't just bossy, they felt mean, like she was picking on him for no good reason. It was like she wanted him gone, no matter what he did. When he got home, Jake sat on his couch and stared at the motion sensor light outside. He wasn't taking it down. It was his house, his property, and he had every right to keep it up. Plus, he wasn't going to let Karen bully him into doing what she wanted. No way. But Karen, oh, she wasn't done, not even close. Over the next few days, things got worse. Jake started noticing her sneaking around his yard when she thought he wasn't looking. One morning, he caught her standing by his mailbox, snapping pictures of his motion sensor with her phone, like it was evidence for a big crime. Another time, he saw her peeking over his fence, scribbling notes on her clipboard. She'd mutter stuff just loud enough for him to hear, like, "People need to learn their place." It gave Jake the creeps. It wasn't just Karen, either. His neighbors started acting weird. People who used to smile and wave now gave him funny looks, like he'd done something wrong. One guy even crossed the street to avoid him. Jake figured out what was happening pretty quick. Karen was spreading rumors. She was telling everyone that Jake was trouble and didn't respect the community. She made it sound like his tiny light was going to ruin the whole neighborhood. It was so unfair, but that was Karen. She loved making people feel small. Jake stayed cool on the outside, but inside, he was getting super fed up. He didn't like bullies, and that's exactly what Karen was. Then he remembered something important, his side job. See, Jake wasn't just a guy who worked from home. He was a freelance investigator, not like a detective in a movie with a cool hat, but the kind who digs up information for companies. He did things like checking backgrounds or finding out if someone was telling the truth. Jake was really good at it, too. He had a knack for spotting details other people missed, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. And Karen, something about her wasn't adding up. Why was she so obsessed with him? Why was she acting like his little light was the worst thing ever? Most people would just shrug and move on, but not Karen. She was way too angry, way too pushy. Jake started to wonder if she was hiding something. Maybe she wasn't just a grumpy neighbor. Maybe there was a bigger secret behind all her clipboard waving and mean words. Now, Jake didn't have any answers yet, but he was starting to get curious, really curious. He decided to keep a closer eye on Karen just to see what she was up to. If she wanted to play tough, fine, he'd play smart. So what do you think Jake's gonna find out? Got any guesses? Drop them in the comments, because this story about to get really good. Days went by and Karen turned her fight against Jake into a full-on war. She didn't stop with that first yellow violation notice. Oh no, she sent more piles of them. Each one was meaner than the last, written in big, angry letters. One note said Jake's motion sensor light was ruining the neighborhood. Another said he'd have to go to court if he didn't take it down. Court, can you believe that? All over a tiny light that helped keep his house safe. Jake shook his head every time a new note showed up. Karen was acting like his light was a giant problem, but it was just silly. Things got worse, though. Jake's neighbors, who used to smile and say hi, started acting weird. People he'd chat with about the weather or their dogs wouldn't even look at him anymore. One lady, Mrs. Carter, used to wave from her porch. Now she hurried inside when Jake walked by. Another guy, Tom, who loved talking about his garden, crossed the street to avoid him. Jake's stomach felt heavy. He wasn't a bad guy. He kept his yard tidy and never made trouble. So why were people acting like he was a stranger? Then it hit him, Karen. She was spreading stories about him. Jake heard whispers that she was telling everyone he was a troublemaker. She said he didn't care about the neighborhood's rules and was trying to mess things up. People believed her because she was the HOA president. They thought she knew everything. Karen's gossip was like a dark cloud, making everyone turn against Jake. It wasn't fair, but that's how it was. Jake could have given up. He could have taken the light down and let Karen win. But nope, he wasn't that kind of guy. Instead, he got smart. Remember that side job I told you about? Jake was an investigator, not like a detective with a big hat, but someone who finds out secrets for companies. He was super good at digging up information, like finding puzzle pieces and putting them together. So Jake decided to use those skills on Karen. Not in a sneaky, bad way, just to figure out why she was so mad about his light. He started looking up stuff about her. He checked computer files like public records and HOA papers. At first, it was boring. He found out Karen had lived in the neighborhood for a long time. She'd always been the HOA boss, telling everyone what to do. There was no record of her getting in trouble with the police or anything like that. Jake almost gave up, thinking maybe she was just grumpy and mean. But then, bam, he found something strange. Karen's name showed up in some old complaints from other neighborhoods, places she used to live. People there didn't like her either. They called her bossy, snaky, and even dishonest. One person said Karen got in big trouble for taking HOA money she wasn't supposed to. They tried to sue her, take her to court, but the case got dropped for some reason. Jake's eyes got wide when he read that. Taking money, that sounded serious. He didn't have proof yet, but his gut told him there was more to find out. Jake started watching Karen more closely. He wasn't spying or anything creepy, just paying attention. He noticed she was always busy, rushing around like she had secrets to keep. A few times, he saw strange guys in suits show up at her house. They didn't look friendly. One day, Jake was watering his plants when he saw Karen hand one of those guys a thick envelope. Was it money, papers? He couldn't tell, but it definitely wasn't a normal neighbor chat. Karen looked nervous, glancing around like she didn't want anyone to see. Jake's brain started buzzing. What was she up to? Then came a night that changed everything. It was late, around 10 o'clock, and Jake was at his desk working on his computer. All of a sudden, his motion sensor light flashed on, bright as the sun. Jake jumped a little and looked out the window. He thought maybe a cat or a raccoon was out there, but no, it was Karen. She was creeping across his lawn holding a flashlight. What in the world? She pointed the light right at his motion sensor, like she was trying to mess it up or break it. Jake's heart started pounding. This wasn't just annoying anymore, it was weird. He grabbed his phone super fast and hit record. The window was cracked open, so he zoomed in on Karen. She didn't know he was watching. She poked at the light for a minute, muttering to herself, then stomped away, looking mad. Jake stopped recording and played the video back. His jaw dropped when he heard what she said. If he won't listen, I'll make him leave. Whoa, that wasn't just Karen being her usual grumpy self. That sounded like a threat. Jake's hands got sweaty. Make him leave? What did that mean? Was she trying to scare him out of the neighborhood? His mind raced with questions. He wasn't sure what Karen was planning, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to sit around and wait to find out. Now, Jake saved the video on his computer. Then he copied it to a USB stick and emailed it to himself just to be safe. He wasn't taking any chances. Karen was up to something bad and he was going to figure out what. That video was proof she wasn't just complaining, she was sneaking around his house at night. The next morning, Jake's phone rang. It was his friend Mike, who worked at the county clerk's office. Jake had asked him to look up more stuff about Karen just in case there was anything juicy. Mike's voice sounded shaky. "Jake, are you sure you want to mess with this lady?" he said. "I found some things and, well, they're not good." Jake sat up straight. "What do you find, Mike?" Mike paused like he was nervous. "I don't want to say too much over the phone. Let's just say Karen's not who she pretends to be. I'm sending you some files, but you gotta be careful, man." Now Jake's heart beat faster. Not who she pretends to be. That sounded huge. He thanked Mike and hung up, his mind spinning. What was Karen hiding? Was it about the money, something worse? What do you think Jake's gonna find in those files? Got any ideas? Drop them in the comments because this is getting super crazy. It was another quiet night and Jake was just chilling at home. He was watching a movie, snacking on some popcorn when bam, his motion sensor light started going crazy. It kept flashing on and off like it was throwing a party. Jake frowned. That wasn't normal. Something was up. He grabbed his phone and opened the security app he'd set up to check his front yard. And guess who was out there? Yup, it was Karen Thompson sneaking around again. This time, she wasn't just holding a flashlight, she had a screwdriver in her hand. Was she really trying to break his light? Jake's eyes got wide. This was too much. Karen wasn't just being annoying anymore, she was messing with his stuff. He didn't even stop to think. He picked up his phone and dialed 911 right away. Hi, someone's messing with my property, he told the lady who answered. They're in my front yard right now, trying to break my motion sensor light. The lady on the phone was super calm. Okay, sir, can you tell me more? She asked. Jake nodded even though she couldn't see him. He described Karen perfectly, her bright red HOA jacket, her flashlight, and that screwdriver she was waving around like a bad guy in a cartoon. Officers are on their way, the lady said. Stay safe, okay? Thanks, Jake said, hanging up. His heart was thumping a little. He peeked out his window, keeping the lights off so Karen wouldn't see him. There she was, still in his yard, poking at the motion sensor with that screwdriver. She looked mad, muttering to herself, totally clueless that Jake was watching. He shook his head. What was her deal? Why was she so obsessed with his light? Then out of nowhere, the street lit up with red and blue flashes. Jake blinked. Police cars, two of them zoomed up, super quiet but super fast. Jake's jaw dropped. That was quick, way quicker than he expected. He figured it'd take at least 10 minutes for the cops to show up, but this was like seconds. He leaned closer to the window, confused. Were they really here already? But here's the wild part. The police cars didn't stop at his house. Nope, they pulled right up to Karen's house 2 doors down. Jake's brain froze. Wait, what? He grabbed his phone, slipped on his sneakers, and stepped outside to see what was going on. The cool night air hit his face, but he barely noticed. He was too busy watching Karen, who was still in his yard, messing with his light. She hadn't even seen the police yet. Then one of the cops got out of the car. He was tall, with a serious face, and he called out loud and clear, "Karen Thompson." His voice echoed in the quiet street. Karen spun around so fast she dropped her flashlight. It hit the ground with a loud clatter, rolling across Jake's lawn. Her face went super pale, like she'd seen a ghost. "Why, yes," she stammered, her voice all shaky. "What's this about?" The cop stepped closer, his hand near his belt. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said, calm but firm. "Embezzlement, fraud, and falsifying records. Step away from the property and put your hands where we can see them." Jake's mouth fell open so wide he could have caught flies. Arrest, embezzlement, fraud, those were big words, big trouble. He stood there on his porch, frozen, as Karen's eyes got huge. She looked like she wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. "This is a mistake," she yelled, her voice all wobbly. "I'm the HOA president. I'm important. I called you about him." She pointed right at Jake, her finger shaking like a leaf in the wind. Now Jake blinked, totally confused. Called about him? What was she talking about? He hadn't done anything wrong. The second cop, a lady with a ponytail, raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am," she said, "we got a call about you messing with your neighbor's property, but trust me, that's the least of your problems right now." Karen's face went from pale to red in a second. She started talking super fast, like a kid caught stealing cookies. "No, no, no, this is all wrong. It's a misunderstanding. He's the one causing trouble. I'm just trying to keep the neighborhood nice." But the cops weren't listening. They stepped closer, and one of them pulled out handcuffs that glinted in the streetlights. Jake couldn't believe his eyes. Karen, the bossy HOA lady who scared everyone, looked scared. For the first time ever, she didn't seem so tough. Her eyes darted to Jake, and he saw something new in them: panic, pure panic. The cops gently but firmly took her arms and put the handcuffs on. Click, click. Karen kept babbling, saying stuff about slander and mistakes, but it was no use. They started reading her rights like in a movie. "You have the right to remain silent." Now Jake just stood there, his phone still in his hand, trying to make sense of it all. His 911 call had caught Karen messing with his light, but the police were already coming for her. That meant they knew something big. Something way bigger than a broken motion sensor. His mind was racing, trying to put the pieces together. Then, ping, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his buddy Mike, the guy from the county clerk's office. Jake had almost forgotten about the files Mike promised to send. He opened the message, his fingers a little shaky, and clicked on the first file. His eyes scanned the screen and his heart skipped a beat. Oh my gosh. Karen Thompson wasn't just a grumpy HOA lady. She was a crook. The file said she'd been stealing money from the HOA for years, thousands and thousands of dollars. She took the dues everyone paid and sneaked them into fake bank accounts. She even made up fake papers to hide what she was doing. And get this, she'd lied about who she was. Karen had old charges from another state, but she changed her name to dodge them. Jake's digging had helped find some of this, but the cops were already onto her. She'd been sloppy, leaving clues everywhere, and they were closing in. Jake looked up from his phone just as the cops led Karen to the police car. Her head was down, her red jacket crumpled. She didn't look like the bossy HOA president anymore. She looked small, like someone who'd been caught doing something really, really bad. Jake's call had sealed the deal, catching her in the act, but the truth was she'd been falling apart for months. The next morning, Jake woke up to a different neighborhood. It was like someone flipped a switch. Everybody was talking, whispering, and buzzing about what happened. Karen's arrest was the only thing on their minds. Neighbors who used to walk right past Jake without a word were suddenly super chatty. They crowded around his front porch, all wide-eyed and curious. "Jake, what happened?" one lady asked. "Is it true about Karen?" said another. Jake leaned against his door, sipping his coffee, and kept it simple. "She messed with the wrong guy," he said with a little smile. That was all they